How can network mapping supercharge a workplace? So get us started. How do we do
Yeah.
that?
Small question, small question.
Yeah.
Listen, there's so many aspects that you can take to it. I think the most direct path for a lot of organizations to get to understanding their people is starting small. Get small granular data, right? And like we often look at a lot of these organizations that do incredible Herculean work on understanding their customers, understanding their products, markets, and all the work externally, but they don't do the same amount of data retrieval analysis. Um, Mapping and learning of their own people who ultimately, modern organizations, it's the people that drive outcomes. So we need to start by understanding how those people are connected, where trust exists, where trust doesn't exist, where knowledge flows, where it doesn't flow, who's at risk of attriting, who isn't, how value is generated end to end, and finding optimizations, finding ways to make work more joyful, connecting individuals.
So I had the opportunity to see you present your graphic examples of how this
Hmm.
plays out. As our viewership knows, I'm a founding member of the Future of Work Alliance, and you very graciously joined us for one of our meetings earlier this year. Can I put up some of the slides and you can
Yeah, go
talk
for it.
to
Yeah.
get started with who are the hidden connections? So um, these are a little faint, folks. I'm going to post these to our comments later after the show is concluded. But Andreas, why is this important? And network mapping as a
Yeah.
tool to get us there.
Yeah, the easiest response is we all know who the super connectors are in an organization. Usually there's a handful of people that you can point to and say, hey, these are the folks that are doing a lot of the work. But what I've heard over years and years of doing this work in organizations is I spend 10, 15 hours of my week connecting people, helping people find the knowledge, resources, individuals, helping build influence, helping people get the support, feedback that they need. But that doesn't show up in their performance review, right? So at the end of the year, they get marked on basic metrics, and oftentimes we see people that are really knitting the fabric, lubricating, making sure that work actually happens. They don't get recognition for that work, and then oftentimes what happens is those individuals, they get burned out because they're still trying to then hit performance metrics that are just purely outcome based,
Mhm.
and don't really take into account that there's a lot of people that need to connect other individuals and parts of an organization, especially as we get more and more distributed, to make those outcomes possible. And if we're not recognizing those individuals, they get burned out. Those individuals move on to other organizations, and then oftentimes you've both experienced it. Most people probably listening to this have experienced it. Somebody leaves, and all of a sudden, things just don't seem the same way anymore. Things just take longer to get done. There's more and more meetings. Their leaders get overwhelmed. Things slow down. Projects don't hit timelines, budgets, or expectations. And it's because we're missing these hidden connectors. So rather than just focusing on the handful of folks that people can easily point out in an organization, we need to start to understand who are those individuals who are like day in and day out weaving that micro fabric of effectiveness within an organization, connecting people, making sure that people feel like they're not working transactional, but they have individuals who are there to support them, and pulling those out, elevating those individuals to make sure that we can identify who are the people who are day in and day out, making sure that different parts of the organization stay connected.
So let's get to the next slide. Who are the most influential? So
Mhm.
why is it important to network map this?
Influence, it comes in so many different forms, right? You can think about influence from a standpoint of just pure connections. So individuals potentially, if you want just a really simple message to be passed through, you might want to look at influence and who are the individuals who are connecting knowledge within an organization or brokering between communities, and understanding for different types of knowledge to flow, we're going to look for different individuals. And we want to make sure that when we're trying to get mass messages out, we're getting those to the right people. But also if we're trying to shape behaviors, interactions, perceptions, that we're finding individuals who have really close connections to individuals, people who there's trust, reciprocity, understanding, communication. Again, we've all been in organizations where executives are sitting here, they're pushing down information and they just assume that it's just going to disseminate out, but they don't
Mm.
have the right people in those networks. So that's why we always hear about that executive employee disconnect. And oftentimes it's because there's such a disconnect. So we need to find those people who are locally relevant to the populations that we're trying to disseminate information out, being able to identify those individuals, and work with them, right? Bring those
Mhm.
people into close conversations so that they feel that they're actually part of that conversation. So that then when they go to their peers, the people that report up or roll into them or in their periphery or like in their little worlds that they're operating in, that they feel like there's closer connection, that they're closer tied to that information. So being able to pull out people in those instances, and then also using those people to listen up. Who are the people that are getting spoken to the most? Who are the people who are hearing the most on the ground? Those are the people that we want to be in close contact with, right? Because it goes both ways. We want to push information down, but how many organizations claim to be customer first, and executives, middle management have zero connection to the people who are actually daily interacting with customers, seeing problems, interfacing with the challenges of the organization and how it operates. If we don't have the individuals that we know who are influential there, who are the people who are able to gather the information from the people who are frontline workers, who are actually engaging with our customers, we need to identify those individuals so we can kind of collect information at scale and listen up into the organization as well.
So then we get to the periphery. Who's on the
Yeah.
periphery? What can you
Yeah.
tell us
There's
about that?
so many times in organizations, especially when you look at folks who are more tenured in their careers, they have positions of greater authority in the organization, no matter how that's defined. They tend to have more diverse networks, they have more integrated networks. But we start to find in more distributed workplaces, in organizations that are very large, is that you have individuals who have roles that become really siloed off, and those individuals, they start to become less connected to the overall organization. These people
Hmm.
have way higher chances of attriting. So being able to identify people who have few connections, well, not only does that make work less enjoyable, these people tend to be the ones who say work feels transactional. They don't have friends. They feel lonely at work. They feel
Hmm.
disengaged. It's because you're just you're isolated, and oftentimes that's just a product of maybe their leaders aren't as effective in helping them build connections. Maybe there aren't really good programs in the organization for building community, and building connection between areas of different areas of the organization. Maybe they have a really poor onboarding process, or there's something else going on, but we want to identify those individuals who are most likely to attrit, who have fewer connections, and be able to figure out, is this something that's systematic? Oftentimes we find it's junior employees potentially, that came into an organization in particular pathways. So maybe that's just a sign that, hey, we need to change that pathway, or we need to just understand why it's this type of individual, or if it's not systematic, what's going on there? How can we start to uncover the information that we need to bring those individuals closer into the fold? Because the more connections, or the more diverse connections individuals have, and making sure that those connections are aligned with the outcomes that the organization or the business unit is trying to drive towards, we find that those individuals, they stay longer, they contribute more, and they have greater impact in the organization. So identifying them early on, quickly, that's probably the most effective way to getting the most out of your people.
And then we have wide bridges. Explain
Yeah,
that to us.
yeah. So super important. Again, large organizations that are distributed, you start to see them fanning apart. They become more like a archipelago of disconnected islands. And what happens then is that not only things slow down, but knowledge doesn't transfer. And what we saw a lot over the last few years is, as organizations do become a bit more archipelagoed out, and that's not saying that people need to go back to the office. We saw that pre-pandemic in any organization where people are, more than 30 people, and you don't know every single individual who's around you. You start to see that those different teams, different functions, different areas of the organization, they start to be connected by maybe a manager. Maybe that's not a direct connection that somebody has on that team, because it's like, a few steps above them. What you start to see is knowledge doesn't transfer between them. So if you're trying to rapidly move through changing markets, addressing new market opportunities, pounce on opportunities, circumvent shocks to the market, if you don't have those wide bridges, so you have a lot of connections between different parts of the organization, where trust, reciprocity is built up, knowledge slows down. So we want to make sure that we have a good amount of connections where there's reciprocal connection between them, and they're overlapping, so that individuals can not only quickly gather information, but they can kind of start to suss out and understand, where's that information coming from? What was the context within which that decision was made, so that they can absorb that information quicker.